Rudolph drifted to consciousness, the cold floor of the forest beneath him, his head pounding and his left arm numb. For a few moments he was confused before the memories of yesterday flooded back. The bush, Nathan, running through the trees. He was lying in a ravine, though it was dry, so he rolled over, looking up at the morning sky and the grey clouds, though it was not yet raining. After a short while, he decided to find his way home, but as he sat up, he saw his arm. His left arm was wrong. From the elbow down, it had changed. Perfectly white, with no details, no hair, no moles. It was numb as well, though he could flex his fingers and touch things, carefully picking up a stick with the strange hand. He could see the shape of the nails and feel the wrinkles in his palm, but they had no colour. It was also cold to the touch, almost as cold as ice. He worried that his arm was possessed or sick, so he got to his feet and surveyed the trees. The ravine was east to west. The trees were fir, so he must be north of the town. Armed with that knowledge, he climbed the south bank of the ravine and began heading home. As he walked, he noted another strangeness about his discoloured arm. The shadows of leaves were not cast on it. Stopping by a large fir, he held his arm under the dense branches, but it did not darken in the shade, remaining perfectly white, as though it were a ghost. This realization made him panic again, turning south and running for a few minutes, before his heart pounded in his ears and his legs burned with exhaustion. Coming to a stop and leaning against a tree, he panted for a while before looking at his arm again. He had placed his left hand against the trunk of a fir when he stopped, not even thinking about it in his haste. He had rested his weight on the arm. The bark of the fir was dirty, but had not stained his pristine hand. Loose bark slid away from the skin, leaving nothing but white. The strangeness of the skin scared him, but he didn't panic this time. Carefully examining the effect, he pulled some bark away, causing sap to bleed out. The skin of his right hand was quickly stained green, but his left refused to change. Rudolph scanned the ground for a sharp stone, finding one within moments. He carefully tried to cut the skin, a little nick to see if his blood was white or red. As he applied pressure, the skin depressed, but soon he realized he was pushing very hard, but it was not cutting. With reckless abandon, he slashed at the skin, but it was not cut. No harm had come to it at all, nor was there any pain. Rudolph quickly decided that it was some sort of magic, an enchantment or curse. For a moment he smiled, before he recalled what the townsfolk thought of magic. Not one adult in town would like it. They drove a witch out of town 2 years ago. He recalled joining in with the adults, throwing stones at her and yelling. It had seemed fun at the time, but now it made his heart sink. If the villagers didn't drive him out of town, they would certainly try to cut the arm off. His uncle had died after an amputation. Most people did. Rudolph was suddenly scared more of his town than his strange new arm. Staring at it, considering his options, he concluded that if he went back to town, he would either be driven out, or he would lose the arm and perhaps his life. His other option was to walk away, avoiding the casting of stones or the risk of death. Both choices scared him. Considering these options brought tears to his eyes. Both would mean hardship. Both would likely cause his family great pain. Sitting against a tree, Rudolph wept over the choices for a while, until he eventually made a decision. Standing and straightening his clothes, he looked south for a few moments before turning north. He decided it would hurt his mother far more if he returned. To watch him die of some illness from amputation, or having to drive him out of town, Either would be heartbreaking. If he was just gone, she could blame the bush. He had not travelled more than a couple of kilometres from his home before, though he knew there was a city to the east and many more towns to the south. North was the only direction he could take, as the mountains to the west were impassable, but the forests to the north were wild. Within an hour he was north of the ravine, fir trees surrounding him, but among them he could see rabbits and wild potatoes. His stomach rumbling, he decided to forage for some food. Gathering a few potatoes was easy, but it took him an hour to catch a rabbit, eventually leaping on one and killing it with his weight. Finding water and building a fire were easier, though he had no pot, no bowl, no fork, so he cleaned and stripped a stick to use as a fork, a flat stone for a plate, and a few sticks for a spit. Placing the washed potatoes around the edge of the fire and setting the clumsily skinned rabbit on a spit, he set about gathering fir branches for a place to sit, soon discovering that his white arm was able to handle nettles. Their prickly skin made no mark or swelling on its cold surface. Using a sharp stone, he whittled at some wood, something he'd learned from his father. He hoped to make a cup so he could make nettle tea, though he was not sure how to boil the water. He recalled the potter in town making jugs and curing them with fire, so after turning the potatoes, he went to the stream. It was a tributary from the river south of town, so it was rich in red clay. With a few handfuls loaded on his magic limb, he walked back to his little camp, turning the potatoes again as well as the rabbit. His white arm seemed immune to the fire as well, able easily to handle the cooking potatoes, so he tested it, plunging his hand into the flames. He couldn't even feel them. Flexing his fingers, he could see the fire lapping over them, but there was no burning at all. Pulling the hand from the flames, he touched the white flesh with his other hand. It was still cold, no less icy than it felt before. Returning to his clay, Rudolph began to shape a crude jug. He couldn't get the handle to stay on, but he shaped a spout for pouring. Once he was happy with it, he took it in his icy hand and placed it among the burning sticks of his fire. He still had some clay left and had not finished the cup, but the rabbit and potatoes were done, so he satiated his belly, leaving less than half the rabbit and none of the potatoes. After finishing his meal, he washed his stone plate and turned back to the remaining clay, soon fashioning a second jug and a plate, though no better than his first attempt. He was pleased. Rudolph had never had to do so much for himself, but the food was good and he was proud of his pottery. The afternoon drifted to evening as he worked on his whittling. It also had no handle, but by early evening he had shaped a functional cup, soon holding water and quenching his thirst. Evening was cold, so Rudolph started to build a shelter, using fir branches and stones to keep the warmth of the fire and shield him from the rain. He had not finished his work when the rain began, though it was only light, so he hurried along. As the sun set, his shelter was done, allowing him to sit under it, facing his fire. He decided that his first jug must be done, so he reached into the flames and retrieved it. It was hard and ashen on the exterior, but had a large crack down one side, causing Rudolph to feel suddenly overwhelmed, bursting into tears once more and curling up in his makeshift home. After some time, he drifted to sleep, fitful and nightmarish as it was. For several hours, the rainfall grew harder as he slept. Rudolph awoke shivering, ice cold and soaking wet. The heavy rain had worked its way through the simple shelter. The thick clouds and late hour made it pitch dark. Opening his eyes would be useless, but for the strange white flesh. He could still see it clearly, as though it were glowing, though it provided no illumination. It was no less white in the day, clearly visible in the night. It was all he could see. Groping around for the fire, he located the stones with his right hand, then plunged his left into the ashes, turning them in his hand. There was no sign of embers. The rain had seen to that, and there would be no dry wood to burn. Pulling fir branches around himself, he curled up and shivered. There was nothing he could do but wait for dawn to come. The cold and wet lasted through the night. Hours of shivering ensured he could not sleep. Eventually, the faintest sign of the sun appeared through the clouds. The rain letting up quickly. Soon just a few spatters. It was still dark, but he could make out the shapes of trees and the circle of stones he'd laid round the fire. The second jug and plate were in pieces. Left to the flames and rain, they had not survived. Despite the tired, cold, and shivering, Rudolph began to gather his things. There wasn't much to collect. His handmade cup, along with the now wet but cooked rabbit remains, and he decided to take the flat rock. He suddenly realized he had lost his basket, probably when he was running from the bushes. Gathering up some of the fir branches, he did his best to weave a crude basket. It wouldn't last long, but it could carry all his things. More when he gets to the stream. Once the basket was built and loaded, Rudolph got to his feet and wearily began walking north once more. He stopped at the stream and gathered as much clay and potatoes as his basket could carry, placing the last of his rabbit in the cup. Rudolph walked for hours, the rain stopping after the first, the sun slowly dispelling the clouds. As noon approached, he became hungry again, and the forest floor was growing steep, so he found a covered area to sit and eat. The last of the rabbit was quickly gone, so he returned to the walk ahead. Sometime in the mid-afternoon, the ground levelled off again, and the walking became easier, though the trees were denser here. Rudolph had to push branches aside frequently, picking his way ever northward. As the sun drew toward the horizon, Rudolph started looking for firewood, gathering a bundle under his arm. He found a flat and relatively dry area. A large rock to the south blocked the wind, with fir trees around it. He stopped and began to build a fire, striking stones to light the flame. Once it was burning, he surrounded it with stones and began to build a shelter, keeping an eye out for rabbits in the woods. The rain had overcome his first shelter, so he spent more time making this one, laying the roof much thicker and using stones to create a barrier around it, the rock forming the back of the shelter and the fire just in front. Once he was sure of its structure, Rudolph set about shaping his clay. A pot for the cooking first. He made the walls thicker and arranged the fire to set it down. A jug and a plate were next, making them carefully to avoid cracks. Once they were in the flames, he turned to hunting once more, this time with greater success. 2 rabbits before sunset. The dark of the forest was deep, but his fire burned bright, allowing him to skin and prepare the rabbits. The second rabbit was the most successful, the fur coming away in one piece, more or less, so he placed it aside and put the rabbits and some potatoes on to cook, carefully checking and turning his pottery. No cracks so far. While he waited for the food, he carefully scraped and cleaned the hide. He had done this before, many times. His brother was a trapper, often bringing rabbits home to skin and gut. He'd helped clean and prepare their hides around the fire at home. After the hide was hanging and food was consumed, he fed the fire some more wood and examined the cooking pot. It was hard and ashen, with no sign of cracks, making him smile. The jug was also done and free of cracks, though the plate had still cracked in 2. Casting the plate aside, he rubbed off as much ash as he could. They needed washing, but the stream was some distance away, off in the darkness, so it would wait till morning. Feeding the fire once more, Rudolph settled down to sleep, soon dozing off to the crackle of the flames. He did not get long before a sound woke him. He did not hear it clearly, but he was scared. The fire was just embers now, and he could hear sounds. They were moving closer. Grabbing a stick from beside the fire, he began to poke the embers, hoping a flame would come forth. Suddenly, from the trees there was a rushing sound, a wolf leaping from the dark and knocking him over. Rudolph brought his left arm up defensively, causing the wolf to bite down on the pallid limb. Rudolph felt nothing, nor was there any blood. The wolf was atop him, its scrabbling claws cutting his shirt and skin. Reaching for the fire, his hand found a stone, still warm from the flames, so he grabbed it and struck the wolf hard. The wolf let out a sound of agony, its grip on his arm slipping away as it fell to its side. Pulling himself to his feet, blood-stained rock in hand, Rudolph panted from the exertion before realizing there were eyes shining in the dark. The rest of the pack had surrounded him, his back to the rocky outcrop, and the embers fast fading to darkness.